Hello, everyone. Welcome to this month's Embrace webinar for the month of July. I'm scraping in right at the end of July this month. I'm very excited to be sharing this one with you today. I actually got quite a lot of questions about this one. This one is all about attachment. Attachment is something I talk about a lot with my clients. I always get lots of questions about it if I talk about it publicly or post about it. So I'm unsurprised that there's been some questions about it. I think it's one of those topics, one of those terms like attachment styles that have become really popular in kind of the mainstream lexicon, one of those therapy speak, therapy terms, if you like, which I really understand. I really understand its function and purpose. Of course, it's misused or misunderstood sometimes, but like that happens with most of these kinds of themes and topics. But I am very excited to kind of really demystify all things attachment and really spend some time today talking about the fact that you really can do things right now, today, to be building more secure attachment in your relationships. I think if there's anything I like to leave people with when I talk about attachment, is that an attachment style is not a inevitability. You are not doomed with whatever label you give yourself about your attachment style. It's not like, well, this is me, this is what I am now forever. That's not how it works. That is not what attachment styles are. It's not how they were intended to be used. So I really like to think of attachment styles as more like blueprints for our behavior, maybe tendencies or instincts that our nervous system experience that we can, of course correct, relearn, self soothe, and choose new responses, new behaviors all the time, every single day. So I really like to kind of reinforce that message and hopefully instill a little bit of hope for people that regardless of kind of our upbringing and early attachment experiences, we are still well within well within control in terms of how we now behave and what we do to form more secure attachments. Before we finish today, too, I will share a little bit more about my recent Yoni mapping experience, which, if you follow me on socials, you will have seen me talk about a little bit, but I wanted to kind of reveal a little more for you all today, my Unbound members. The only other thing I should make note of before I get into it is my little dog is sleeping on my foot and he seems to be snoring really loudly. So I hope you can't hear it. But if you can, I hope it is not distracting. I don't have the heart to move him. If, as most of you know, unfortunately, I said goodbye to my other dog a couple of months ago, and so this dog is pretty clingy. You could say he and I are a bit anxiously attached as we follow each other around the house, and he does not leave my side, and I do not have the heart to pop him in another room. So I hope the snoring isn't distracting. If it is something you can hear, my apologies. So let's get into it. I'm going to open my notes because I've got my notes here, and I've endeavored to answer some of the questions that I was sent. Um, excuse me. So, uh, I think where I like to start from when we're talking about attachment is that attachment by definition is how we attach to other people, form connection, meaning, and want for another person, right? And we attach to people in all different ways in our lives. And so we should. Something I hear from my clients a lot, particularly those that are dating, for example, is like, I don't want to get so attached, and I'm like, why not? Like, why not? What does being attached represent for you? And of course, when I ask that question, we usually get to a place, reasonably quickly of kind of thinking about how somebody has framed up attachment. Attachment has maybe been a place where they get hurt, rejected, abandoned. Like it's risky to attach. But the reality is that humans are wired for connection. We really are. And in fact, we do not survive in isolation. Like humans need connection. That's where we thrive and heal. It's how we exist in the world. We are interdependent beings. So I want to kind of like dispel any myths about attachment, but I also want to call out that you might have some pre-existing kind of ideas, biases about what attachment means. And I would like you to notice that here. If when I'm using the word attachment, are you feeling some type of way in your body? Is it bringing up some stuff for you? Maybe some labels that you've used to identify yourself about how you attach, or maybe why attachment is something to be wary of or guarded about. So I just wanted to kind of plant that seed. And if you can start to think about attachment as this attachment styles, rather, which I'm going to kind of talk through, as not so much identifying labels, which is something I hear a lot, like I'm anxiously attached or I'm avoidant, they're avoidant. Uh, think of attachment styles as more like adaptations to our early environment, right? Attachment is formed from very young age, from the second we're born. And it is how our brains and bodies made sense of the world and our place in it, particularly in the context of relationships. And of course, the most important relationships in early years is our primary caregivers. So attachment is about adaptations to our early environment based on those interpersonal attachment experiences. And I'm not going to give you a full psychology lesson. But I do think it is interesting to understand the foundations of attachment theory. So just very briefly, this is like going to take me back to year 11, year 12 psychology. And believe me when I tell you I've got my notes, this is stuff that I necessarily remember off the top of my head. Excuse me, sort of in the 1960s, 70s, that kind of era, 50s, 60s, 70s, we had John Bowlby. And Bowlby is considered kind of the father of all things attachment theory. And he was one of the first on record to posit that early relationships with our caregivers kind of form the blueprint for how we then go on to have relations and experience emotions in our relationships, right? So he really emphasized the importance of secure base, safe haven. This idea that, particularly as a child, I can go out and explore the world and I have this secure base to come back to that is consistent and always here, which was typically, of course, parent, primary caregiver. And in the 60s and 70s, most of the research was done with mothers because they were considered the primary caregivers. So babies and children were learning the importance of secure base. I can go out and explore, come back, this person is here, and this person is also safe haven, meaning they are a place of comfort if I am in distress. So come back to my safe haven, right? Now, in the 70s, Mary Ainsworth expanded on this research and she did the very famous strange situation experiment, which you might be familiar with. She had infants um, uh, engage in this study with their mothers, and a couple of different things happened in the study, but she was observing how infants reacted to separation and reunion with mothers. And she would do different things, like she would have other people come in the room, she would moderate the mothers to behave differently with the infant, things that frankly probably ethically wouldn't kind of pass the pub test these days, because there are very strict ethics about how we use humans, particularly children, for studies. But she basically had strangers and mothers kind of reacting to infants coming in and out of the room. And she was really monitoring how the infants were reacting to being separated from their mother, but also being reunited with their mother. And it was really her that identified these three core styles of attachment. And she identified two types of insecure attachment, which were avoidant and anxious. And she also identified secure attachment. And it was about a decade later that a fourth type of attachment style was added, which is this disorganized attachment. So I'm going to talk about what each of these mean in a tick. But I think, what Bowlby and then Ainsworth were kind of highlighting and emphasizing was that these early attachment styles, preferences, experiences would then go on to influence how we showed up in our emotional and romantic relationships as adults. This would go on to determine how we handled intimacy, periods of separation, conflict, vulnerability, sexuality. Like they were really positing that you could make some links between these early developmental experiences and adult relational experiences. So I want to talk through the attachment styles and what they each mean, I might start with the insecure types. So I might start with anxiously attached, anxious attachment. Anxious attachment is considered to often come from early childhood experiences or developmental experiences in which caregiving was inconsistent. So that might be the actual physical caregiver was inconsistent, like maybe the parent was away sometimes or not always available, but also the experience of love and emotional caregiving was inconsistent. So maybe there was a sense of like, I can't always go to this caregiver. Maybe they're not always going to be emotionally available. Maybe their reactions are unpredictable. Maybe their comings and goings are unpredictable. Maybe my lifestyle is kind of unpredictable as a child. Um, there is this core kind of deep-seated need for reassurance, and there is fear here. So, anxious attachment often feels like a fear of rejection or abandonment, of loss, like the relationship is going to end. So the person with an anxious attachment style might crave this kind of closeness and reassurance. They might often verbalize a need for frequent reassurance. There might be a lot of questioning. And what I see play out kind of practically in adults is this kind of overthinking. So lots of reading into tone or energy, text messages, dating patterns, communication habits, that kind of thing. So this kind of overthinking. And if you think of anxiety, right, as like our body's system for scanning for danger, if I believe that at any moment my caregiving or my relationship might be kind of taken away, like at any moment it could go away, you can imagine the fear that rises up in me at the anxiety of that thought. And that's where the reassurance comes in, this kind of checking behavior. The worry is really painful for anxiously attached people because the worry shows up and the anxiety shows up at the slightest thing, right? These people can often be hypersensitive to changes in communication patterns. But then there is this worry that I'm too much, right? Like I'm asking too much, I'm too needy, I'm too much reassurance seeking. So then there's this kind of now there's anxiety that I'm too much. So there's anxiety that I'm going to be left or abandoned. This person's going to take away their love or care. And now I'm also worried that as a result of trying to manage that fear, I've now become too much. I'm too annoying, I'm a burden, like this kind of stuff. So the anxiety is this really like chronic cycle that can never be really resolved, if you like, because the power of the reassurance seeking is so short-lived. So if I'm concerned that like my partner is if I'm anxiously attached and then I'm concerned that my partner is upset with me and I'm messaging them for reassurance, and at some point they write back and say, "Yeah, I'm fine. I was just in a meeting. I'm fine." I might experience some relief, but it's so short-lived. It might be minutes. Like it's so short-lived. And then there's another worry. There's another worry to come. Does this person still love me? Are they going to stay with me? So that is anxious attachment. And then we have avoidant attachment. Now, a bit of like, I need to do like a bit of self-disclosure here and also a bit of like disclaimer here. Avoidant gets a bad rap, right? I think it's considered like the kind of meanest or worst kind of attachment style, and I see this kind of commentary a lot around avoidant attachment. I've even seen commentary around people with avoidant attachment like can't really be in relationships, and these are absolutely not true, right? Because remember, we want to come back to these were adaptations from our early childhood. We can build secure attachment anytime. Now, I said self-disclosure. My tendency is to be a bit avoidant. And because I feel so passionately about avoidant attachment being misunderstood, I want to share a couple of examples here. So, avoidant attachment results from the idea that feelings of like love and closeness and vulnerability are too vulnerable, too risky, too much. And this can happen when we have childhood experiences where emotional expression was really actively discouraged, probably not role modeled. Caregivers were probably emotionally unavailable or cold, and love really felt very conditional. So, what this can often result in children is really high levels of independence, hyper independence, lots of like self-sufficiency. I'll just go and take care of things over here. Because maybe when I went to my parent, maybe I was met with kind of criticism or like dismissiveness. You're being silly. There's nothing to worry about. This real sense of like, okay, like I can't rely on other people to help me take care of things. I obviously just need to take care of things on my own. So people who have avoidant attachment styles are usually really good at being self-sufficient, and they probably value that about themselves. Like they probably see that as quite a strength, and it probably has been a strength lots of times. And in fact, as children, it was probably even reinforced. Like children with this kind of experience were probably described as really like responsible and mature. And this kind of independence was probably celebrated. Closeness can feel a bit suffocating for people with avoidant attachment style because it can feel like something is going to be required of them. So it feels like pressure. So when there is emotional intensity or emotionally charged conversations, people with avoidant attachment styles can find that very uncomfortable and they can feel like something's going to be required of me that I don't feel safe to give, that I don't know how to give. So they can shut down or withdraw or pull away. Emotional vulnerability for people with avoidant attachment can become incredibly distressing. I was going to say uncomfortable, but actually distressing sometimes. The thing I really want people to understand with avoidant attachment is I actually think the word avoidant um, is misleading. It gets mixed up. People conflate the term with it meaning that somebody wants to avoid intimacy or avoid closeness, but actually it couldn't be further from the truth. The closeness, the vulnerability is intensely uncomfortable, maybe even distressing, but it is still wanted. And that is the really important thing I want people to understand about insecure attachment styles, like anxiously attached or avoidantly attached, is that people still want connection, still want intimacy. So that's kind of something I highlight to my clients all the time. We still want the same things, we just go about it in different ways. Now, I said I have a tendency to be avoidantly attached, which I definitely do. If my partner was to ever watch this webinar, gosh, he would laugh and laugh when I say that because he would be like, yeah. Uh, I have a real tendency to shut down and pull away at signs of emotionally charged conversation or at signs of just emotional difficulty. And I know that might come as a surprise to you, given what I do for a living, but it's true. This is really my experience. I can feel it in my body when my partner and I are having emotional conversations. That even if they're not really like conflicts, even if they're just kind of heavy, after about a few minutes, I can feel myself kind of zoning out. And my partner, we have even shorthand for it now. My partner will be like, "How you doing? How long do we have left?" And I'm like, a couple of minutes. Like I can feel that I'm like, my nervous system is trying to get me out of there. Early in our relationship, it looked like physically trying to get out of there. I would frequently, in the face of kind of heightened emotion, be like, "I think you should go home," or "I'm going to go home." Like that was very much my language. And he would be like, what are you talking about? Like, why? I'm sleeping here the night, or you're sleeping here the night. And I'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna go. And he'd be like, what are you talking about? So I'm very much a like, I gotta run, right? That's what my nervous system has done. And I know why. I had some of those experiences in my childhood that I was using as examples earlier, experiences of my emotions being met with like that they are kind of silly or frivolous, lots of don't be silly kind of messages. And I was classic, like eldest daughter, right? So my avoidant attachment tendencies are an attempt at re-establishing a sense of safety so I can be close, right? So I can connect. I'm not trying to avoid love or avoid closeness. I desperately want that, just like every other human on the planet. I want connection. Uh, and I will pull away to re-establish a sense of safety so I can connect. That is really important to understand about avoidant. Now, disorganized attachment essentially is a mix of some anxious and avoidant tendencies. And as you've probably guessed, comes about as a result of really highly unpredictable caregiving experiences, often a trauma history. So there's like this push-pull in relationships. So lots of, people just use language to me like walking on eggshells with caregivers. Sometimes it was safe, sometimes it was dangerous, but I wouldn't know. And I could easily be hurt at any moment. I could go to my primary caregiver as a child, seek support. Maybe I would get it. I would get nurturing and validation and holding space, but sometimes maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I would get shut down or sent away or punishment or um, a rejection, whatever it was. So people can kind of swing between behaviors that look like avoidant tendencies and behavior look like anxious tendencies, which can mean sometimes some intensity in the emotional highs and lows. So that's kind of disorganized attachment, far more common when there's been childhood trauma that directly involves primary caregivers. Secure attachment is essentially that love and everything that goes with love, vulnerability, emotional closeness, all of that, that feels safe. It's safe to be vulnerable and loved. So this is usually fostered in an upbringing where caregivers made them feel really safe and valued and that like and consistent. Like you consistently expect things from your caregivers. So this people with secure attachment often feel really comfortable being close, but also really comfortable being independent. Lots of that secure base, safe haven stuff I mentioned before from Bowlby, feel really safe to go out and explore the world and come back to my secure base. Feel really open to communicate my needs, ask for what I want, express needs, express opinions, disagree, and also listen to my partner and have them do the same. And it's not destabilizing. So I can have a conversation with my partner. We can potentially agree to disagree. We can compromise. I don't get all my needs met. They don't get all their needs met. But ultimately, that's all kind of tolerable. Like it feels safe. This isn't about the absence of emotion. It's about a sense of safety. So that means things like conflict can be resolved without a fear of abandonment, right? Which makes a massive difference. If I feel like, hey, you and I are in this together, and even though we're having a conflict and we're not happy at the moment, and we've got emotions, maybe I'm sad or angry or whatever, there isn't that fear of abandonment or rejection. And that constant need for reassurance isn't there. Now, I'm cautious with my words there because we all need reassurance sometimes, but this is about kind of a moderated level. So that's a bit about the attachment styles. Now, as I was saying before, the really good news is that this isn't like a predetermined inevitability. It's not like if I had certain experiences in my upbringing, I'm kind of doomed for the rest of my life and the rest of my relationships. We can build secure attachment anytime. The other thing I would add to that though is I really like to shift this as being about a self-identifying label and more about kind of tendencies and experiences that can change between even relationships. And I think about this in my own life. I am in a romantic relationship now where we have built and build and actively still build secure attachment. But as I said, I've got avoidant tendencies. So would I consider my partner and I securely attached? Yes. Do some of my avoidant tendencies and instincts still flare up sometimes? Definitely yes. And a relationship that I was in just prior to this one, I would say I was very anxiously attached. And that was due to some things happening in our dynamic that really brought up a very anxious, insecure, uncertain part of me that I'd never even met before. And that was because of some things happening between us and in his life that brought out this kind of real anxiety, need for reassurance kind of stuff. So it really can change within relationships. So the brain is very plastic. Now, there are a few other things I want to mention here about secure attachment, which is that to form secure attachment is kind of a multi-pronged attack, if you like. There is inner work to do, but there is also relational work to do. And it's why you've probably heard me say before that we heal in our relationships. Because people often talk to me about being ready for relationships. Like, I'm going to do all this self-work and then I'm ready. And I'm like, I hate to be the bearer of bad news for you, but there isn't, we can't do all of this on our own. Ultimately, at some point, we do as much work as we can on our own. And ultimately, at some point, we have to also let someone else in if that's what we want. And then we do more healing in that relationship. And then, of course, the other person in that relationship is bringing their own stuff too, their own attachment stuff too. If we were to imagine, though, having a securely attached romantic relationship, that would look like I am able to respond from a place of regulation and insight rather than react from a place of dysregulation. I am able to tolerate being close and also being apart. I can tolerate closeness and distance. I can communicate my own needs and boundaries. I can ask for what I want and need, and I can tolerate the same from my partner. And in fact, I welcome the same from my partner. And finally, I can trust others and I can accept influence from my partner without losing myself. I'd really like you to think about this and maybe even if you want to pause this webinar here to really think about times in your life, maybe even a current relationship, and think about what is happening for you in that relationship that helps you feel emotionally safe and secure. And then also what happens in that relationship that triggers a feeling of emotional insecurity or unsafety. This is really important to start to really think about, like, what are the things that happen in my life, in my relationship, that build safety and security. I want to talk now about a couple of practical things that you can do to build some more secure attachment in your relationship and to build more patterns of responding from a place of secure attachment rather than reacting from a place of dysregulation. So, I've got a couple of really practical things here. I think one of the most helpful things that I have ever done personally, and it's ongoing work, is getting to really know my triggers. Like, really, really know. Not just say them, not just be like, oh, I know I'm triggered when I'm just going to make something up, when my partner takes ages to respond to a text or is late home from work, whatever. But really thinking about, okay, if these are some situations that trigger me, what's really happening in those moments for me. Get really to that emotional need. So if I'm triggered by my partner not taking a while to respond to a text and like showing up late home from work, what is really the story I'm telling myself when those things happen? Like, does my mind go to, oh, he's mad at me, or something bad has happened to him. He's been in an accident, or he's having an affair and met someone else. Like, what's the story I'm telling myself? What's the underlying fear? Am I fearing that I'm going to lose this person? Am I fearing that I'm being rejected, replaced, abandoned, like left? That someone's displeased with me? Like, what's the real underlying fear? And where do I recognize that fear from? What was that like as a child? What kind of things would trigger that fear? Was that fear kind of validated? Like, did those things happen for me as a child? And as I've grown up, where else have those fears shown up? So get really underneath the trigger, not just the behavior, but really underneath the story there. And then what do I do when those things happen? Am I getting defensive? Am I lashing out? Am I withdrawing, silent treatment, checking out, shutting down? Am I panicking, getting anxious, reassurance seeking, crying, getting distressed, like I can't work, can't do anything? Really thinking about the emotional needs under the trigger, and then what are kind of some of my default patterns? And again, going back to childhood, like where did I learn these kinds of responses and how were these responses received? Like maybe the responses I've developed were actually really reinforced as a child. So for example, if I had an emotional need and instead of bothering my parents with it, I went and took care of it myself. Maybe my parents seemed really pleased with me. Maybe I got a reward. Maybe they were like, you did a really good job solving that problem yourself. So maybe I got reinforced this idea of like, it's better if I just take care of things myself. Like I shouldn't trouble people with my worries or burdens or feelings or needs. I should just can't take care of it myself. So really get to know this stuff, right? I promise you how you react and respond in emotional situations and emotional conversations, it's not random, right? It's really rooted in some very old stuff. This is why I don't use the word overreacting. I firmly believe our nervous system is reacting to the exact level of threat it detects. When I talk about solo work too, I think it's important to think about where you need support. Like, is this work you need to do in therapy? Hmm, excuse me. Is this something you need to spend some time just with yourself? Does it need some journaling? Do I need to kind of write some of these questions I've been posing to you just now to get you to think about like your triggers, for example, and childhood experiences? Do you need to write some of those down and really sit with them? Journaling is well worth the effort. I understand it feels like a chore to pull out a pen and piece of paper and really write it down. There is a reason therapists bang on about journaling so much. It has got scientifically backed evidence that it helps. And what it does fundamentally is slow our thoughts down so we can pay attention to them because we cannot write as fast as we think. So at the moment, my thoughts are going a million miles an hour. They're telling me all sorts of stories that are making me feel all types of ways. Journaling slows all of that down. I write down my thoughts. I can notice my feelings. I can notice my reactions, and I can start to get some distance from them. You might need some therapist support here to really kind of explore early attachment experiences and also learn how to soothe. So if something happens that triggers you, you might have a really good understanding of your trigger now based on some of those questions I just posed, but you might not have the skills to kind of manage the distress. You might need some strategies to manage distress, tolerate it, regulate your emotions. Because then comes what I'm going to say is probably the most important part of building secure attachment, practicing new responses. Knowing what my triggers are, preparing for them as best I can, practicing my skills to tolerate distress, and then responding when I am triggered in new ways. This is why self-reflection work only goes so far. We ultimately need to be in our relationships practicing new responses over and over and over again. And that's what I do. When I can feel myself starting to shut down and wanting to disengage in a difficult conversation, instead of just doing that and just letting that happen and just being like, yeah, I'm off, I'll tell my partner, I'll be like, oh, I'm feeling that, like zoning out. I'm feeling that kind of shut down. Can we have a break? Or can we go for a walk to continue this conversation? Or can we have a hug before we go any further? Like, it's about noticing those reactions and then choosing a different response, right? Staying with the discomfort rather than doing things that would normally get rid of the discomfort, like reassurance seeking or running away or shutting down. Like this again and again and again, choosing different responses. This will mean asking for things, right? As I said, this sometimes means that I'm saying to my partner, I need a break or I need a hug or can you say that again? I didn't quite take it in or like I need to go for a walk together or whatever it is. Like this is really important, this bit. This like being really willing to ask for what I need over and over again, even though for a long time, maybe even forever, some fear is here to stay. Some fear is here for all of us. That fear of like rejection or like, am I going to ask for something I don't get? Am I too much? And you know what? Sometimes you might ask for things that you don't get. Like that's part of it too. Asking for what we need doesn't mean we always get what we need. So it's about knowing I might not get what I need, but I can tolerate that too. So there's a lot of self-trust here that is building when we're talking about secure attachment. And of course, we're only talking about this from one way. I mean, there's also the other way, like secure attachment happens between people. So your partner is also going to be asking for things that they want and need from you. You might be in a conversation that you want to continue, that you're feeling is really productive, and your partner says, I can't do this, I need a break. And that might feel annoying or frustrating or like unfair or all the things, right? So like finding these kind of compromises so people can roughly get what they want is ongoing work in a securely attached relationship. I think on that too, something that I think about is just how important it is to choose a partner who really supports your growth. And that usually means they have done or are doing their own work as well. Like I do a lot of work with individual clients. Most of my work is with individual clients. And of course, their partner isn't in the room. So I can be giving them all the tools in the world for like communication and self-soothing and conflict resolution, all of that. And then they might take it home to their partner, and their partner goes, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Right? That could happen. So choosing partners that are also um, open to their own growth and supporting your growth is really important. They've got to be willing to also be doing the same work on the other side of the fence, doing their own communication, also asking for what they want and need, also care about making each other feel safe, right? And also able to do their own regulation and self-soothing. So, like this kind of two-way emotional growth, emotional stability is really important because our reactions, our attachment styles, which are just tendencies, reactions, they're patterns that we've learnt. And the good news about that is that patterns can shift. And of course, the slightly difficult part about that is that patterns can be really strongly reinforced. So choosing partners who can help you cultivate shifts in your patterns for the better is really important. And I think as I'm saying that, I'm thinking about my own experience in my own relationship, like having a partner who, what a difference it makes to have a partner who's like, who really kind of cares about me having the best experience, but also isn't just going to like cop if I engage in behavior that isn't really fair or coming from a regulated place. So he's able to kind of honor his own boundaries and needs as well as hold space for mine. And I just, as I'm saying that to you, I'm reflecting on how enormously powerful that is and what a difference that makes in me feeling securely attached. I've had relationships in the past where people like loved me and cared about what was best for me, but also really didn't hold their own boundaries. And to be honest, if people can't hold their own boundaries, it doesn't really make me feel like they can hold mine too. So actually, boundaries are really containing. Makes me feel enormously safe when my partner says no to me. We joke about it. Like if he says no to me, I'm kind of like, oh, I love when you say no to me. But I do. My nervous system does love it because it really invokes safety. And if I can trust someone to say no to me, it means I can really trust their yes. So if I know my partner's really capable of saying no to me, then when he says yes to something for me, I know it's a really wholehearted yes. And that brings a lot of trust. It's another way of reassurance seeking, right? But in a really healthy way. So I hope that's given you a little bit to think about with regards to attachment styles. I keep saying it in like quotation marks because I don't think it's a really helpful language. Think of them as early behavioral adaptations to the environment you were in, some patterns of learnt reactions that probably kept you safe and emotionally cared for a really long time that don't serve you and your adult relationships, and you need to relearn more secure patterns of attachment. And that is something you can start doing today, whether you're in a relationship or not. You can be doing that work on your own and or with a partner or partners. I'm just having a look. I just want to have a look too, because as I said, I got sent a couple of questions. I just want to make sure. I got sent a question about attachment style compatibility. You know, like, is it best for someone with one attachment style to be with someone else? I would say, and well, not just I would say, the science tells us, the research tells us no. What really matters is what I was saying at the end there about partners who are willing to do the work together, have the emotional maturity, have the willingness, have the communication skills. So actually, that is what's far more important. So I've known lots of different couple configurations, people who would say they're both anxious or both avoidant or one of each or one is secure and one is insecure, whatever it is. And that isn't we know the research tells us that's not really a predictor of relationship success. The predictor is the willingness to work, the willingness to like continue to respond in ways that are rooted in secure attachment. Yeah. I just saw, I remembered another question I got. I got a question about, I've kind of touched on it a bit, but I do want to kind of emphasize here about like the inevitability of attachment styles. The question was, if I'm an anxiously attached person, am I that way forever? And the answer is no. And hopefully that's an answer that you are now not surprised about based on what you've heard me say. That no, this is not about a label, an identifier. Hi, my name's Laura, I'm avoidantly attached. That's not how it works. This is about patterns I learnt, skills I learnt as a child to keep myself emotionally safe that are no longer serving me. I think I've answered all the other questions that I got asked. But if you have any more you want to know about uh, attachment, have a look at the blog that is in my, there's a blog in my Unbound blog library about attachment that goes into a little bit more detail here. Uh, and just always reach out. You know, I'm always happy to like make content that meets your needs and interests. So reach out anytime. And in fact, I prefer to do that. I will always prioritize requests from members for particular types of content. So reach out anytime. Now, I said I would share a little bit more about my yoni mapping, and actually, I did get a couple of questions about this too. And I know I talked a bit about it on my socials publicly, but I wanted to share more information just for you all. You know, the reason I booked it, the reason I booked this yoni mapping, was because I feel as I get older and become more self-aware, I can really feel the tension I carry in my body. Now, I've always had feedback about the fact that I carry tension in my body. My partner's a myotherapist, and he said it from the second he touched me, I think, like that he could feel this tightness, this tension. But I've had this feedback, from physios and osteos and stuff for years, and I've known it, but I reckon this year I'm really feeling it. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that, actually. I think some of why I can feel my body more is some of what actually I was just talking about. I am in a really wonderfully healthy, communicative, secure relationship, and I think it's letting me relax a little, and that is making me notice how physically unrelaxed I often am. Uh, I think my age is coming into it. So, like, I'm in my early 40s. I think I've got some stuff going on that indicates perhaps the presence of perimenopause. And my body is just going through some changes that I feel hyper aware of. So, I have quite a lot of body awareness. The other thing that's going on for me, as you well know, of course, is grief. Having lost my beautiful dog a couple of months ago. And I don't have a lot of personal experience with grief. So this has really like hit me hard. It's been harder than I expected, if I'm honest. So, and that's really impacted my body physically. And I have really buggered up my jaw, doing a lot of work with healthcare professionals, but also on my own, because I've been clenching and teeth grinding, and I've done some real damage to my jaw now that's going to take some time to unwind. Um, so I've been thinking about that. And the jaw is connected to the pelvis and the womb, which is something I've been doing a lot of research about, and I could say a lot more about that. So all of that was in my head when I was like, I want to do a yoni mapping. Oh, the final piece, actually, the bit that I missed, is in addition to tension, I have a long pain history with endometriosis and vaginismus. And I've had a number of surgeries involving my abdominal area and carried a lot of pelvic pain and tension. So much so that a couple of years ago, I saw a pelvic physio who had to retrain me on how to use my bladder. That's how much damage I had done from holding so much tension in my pelvis. I wasn't even peeing how you're supposed to pee, right? So this was a revelation to me. Like I was like, oh my God, like how I'm holding all of this stuff in my body. So all of that in the background was why I booked a yoni mapping, because I was really curious to see just what I might learn. So that was kind of why I booked it. It wasn't like to fix or do anything. I was just like, I wonder what I can learn about that part of my body and about tension in that part of my body in particular. So I booked in with Rachel White, who's a practitioner based up in sort of Byron Bay. And I'd never been there before, so I turned it into a little solo getaway, which I highly recommend, by the way. And I went into it kind of, if I'm honest, and I haven't said this publicly, uh, I reckon maybe a little bit skeptical, maybe a little like, um, what am I really going to get out of this? And I also know so much about my body, and I'm so well educated in this area. I was like, what could I really kind of like, what am I going to learn, basically? Uh, so I went in there with Rachel. We had a beautiful conversation at the start. She had a beautiful space, and she also had beautiful energy. And she gave me initially a full body massage that was arguably one of the most relaxing massages I've ever had. And I've had a lot of massages, but I think I fell asleep, and I just felt really dropped into my body and felt really present. It was gorgeous. And then she kind of gets up on the bed with you, and she's obviously wearing gloves. And then she says, I'm gonna like, do I have your consent, your full body consent to kind of touch you here on your vulva? So she's sort of touching my thighs and sort of abdomen, and then moving to touch my vulva, and then getting consent to actually move her fingers internally. Now, initially what happened was my body would really not let her in, which doesn't surprise me. Like I said before, long history of vaginismus. I am someone who has never ever used a tampon. Like it's like my body just doesn't allow it, right? And I don't have like a trauma history to do with this part of my body or anything like that from when I was younger. But I would say I have a trauma, like a trauma history medically from all the pain, the many years it took to diagnose the endovaginismus, and probably pushing through some like painful sexual encounters as well. Just thinking like, oh well, I just gotta be like, get on with it. Sex that was, I would still say was wanted, but I was ignoring pain signals from my body. So when Rachel was trying to move her fingers internally and was noting my body's resistance, she went with it. She was like, that's okay. Like, I want her to lead the way. I want her to only let me in when she's ready. And even just the way she said it just really helped me soften and it helped me receive. Now, this is really interesting, of course, for me sexually, because I am aware of rushing sometimes because I have this sense of like, oh, it'll be annoying if I want to take time, right? This orgasm pressure stuff that I've got, burden, like I'm a burden. I better just like let them in, right? So it was really interesting to feel my body soften when it got the signal from Rachel. Like, she was like, we've got all the time in the world. I am only going to move at her pace. If she doesn't want to let me in today at all, that's fine. And that was really nice to hear. I don't think I'd ever heard it said verbally quite like that before, even though I've had some really wonderful experiences with sexual partners, but also with healthcare providers who were very respectful and very slow with their pace. Just the way she said it and held space for that was really remarkable. So then when she was able to move internally, she was saying to me that she was going to be moving her fingers in different directions. Think of it like a clock, that if she's got her fingers upwards, it's like 12 o'clock, downwards is like 6, 3, and 9. And she said, I want you to tell me if you can feel the direction my fingers are kind of moving in. So I was giving her feedback as she was moving. And what was really remarkable was that on my right hand side, I could give really clear, easy feedback. I can feel exactly what she was doing. On my left hand side, I couldn't have told you what her fingers were doing at all. It was so numb. And we were really noticing this. And she did a lot of work on that left hand side, but it was really hard to like loosen up. And I would probably benefit from more work in that space. And she and I talked about as homework, me doing more self touch, self massage, right? But I've done a bit of research, and so has she, and we've talked since about this left-hand side numbness, which is linked to two really interesting things. The first is it's linked to maternal issues, and like obviously I'm a therapist. I talk about people's mums every day. It's lots of jokes about, mums are the reason we're all in therapy. My relationship with my mum is probably something I'm not going to get into here, but of course it's got its complexity like most of us, right? So there's some maternal issues relating to this left-hand side numbness. The other thing that shows up with this left-hand side numbness is the connection to the feminine, particularly around receiving. And receiving is something I've hugely struggled with. Got a lot of hyper independent stuff for me. Some of the stuff I was just talking about earlier today, self-sufficiency, hyper independence, solve my own problems kind of stuff. So receiving in any kind of way is challenging for me. Receiving pleasure, receiving help, receiving feedback, input, support, caregiving, like all of it is really hard for me. I work at it, I'm getting better at it, but it's still hard. And I've kind of come to terms with the fact that it will probably be hard to some degree forever, right? Because I've been so conditioned to do this self-sufficiency, hyper independence stuff, right? So that numbness is really related to some difficulty really letting go, letting in, and receiving. And I am so fascinated by this. So I've been thinking about that a lot, been talking about that with my partner about how can I practice receiving more, not just sexually, but just in lots of ways. He's someone I feel very safe with. So how can I practice receiving, taking up space, asking for things? And the other day, I'm really happy to share this with you because it's just between us. The other day, I had a very difficult client day. Some really tough stuff came up in sessions, and I came home and had a bath, which is very common for me. And he came into the bathroom towards the end of that bath. Uh, and it was about, what time was it when I was getting out of the bath? I don't know, 6 p.m. I'd gotten home about 5 and it was about 6. And so we're kind of getting ready to settle into our evening, maybe have dinner. And I asked him for oral sex. Now, that is not a tough ask for him. It's his favorite thing in the world to do. I'm very blessed. But it's sometimes hard for me to ask for and to really relax and receive. But I felt really relaxed. My body felt really good. It was warm from the bath. I'd really decompressed from the day, and I said something to him. I can't remember the words I used, but along the lines of asking, could I have this? And he was kind of a bit startled, and he was like, oh, yeah, of course, but like now. And so then I started to backpedal. I was like, oh, like, no, it doesn't have to be now. Like, do you want to have dinner? Like, I just started rambling. No, do you want to have dinner? And like, do you want to watch this show? And like, we can do it later. And blah, blah, blah. I just thought now because I'm like, feel relaxed and I'm warm and, it's good when I'm warm. And he very quickly could saw what I was doing. And he's like, no, no, like, pause, like, time out. Yes. The answer is yes, you can have this. I want to do this now. Let's get the room ready. Let's do it now. Right. So he was really able to recognize my own kind of, don't worry, like, I don't want to ask for this. And that's what we did. And this is the kind of stuff I'm trying to practice, this idea of like asking, receiving, taking up space. But I think about this a lot. Is this taking up space stuff just going to be lifelong? Like, yeah, maybe, probably. Yeah. So that was kind of what's come out for me from my yoni mapping, right? Is this idea of like receiving. That's kind of if I had to give one word for like the takeaway, it's that, which is really not what I expected. Really not what I expected from booking this yoni mapping. So yeah, it was really very revealing. I'm really glad that I did it. That is it for this webinar today. I always am left with a vague, I think it's called a vulnerability hangover. I'm always left with a vague sense of like, have I shared too much? But also I feel good about it. I feel good about sharing here. This stuff is real. It affects all of us. We've all got relationships, we've all got bodies, we've all got attachment stuff. So I'm always really happy if I feel like I can share insights from my own life that I think are helpful. And I hope this has been helpful. As always, my beautiful members, if you've got questions, content you want me to produce more about, things you want to learn more about, anything at all, reach out to me. Whenever I get messages or emails from you, it really makes my day. This is a part of my job that I just love and adore. I really value being able to provide this membership. So don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything you want to know more about. But yes, lovely to see you all. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Bye for now.